We're now going to hand in your briefings. We're now going to take roll in the sense of checking them off. Oh, really full class today. Now I know when you guys show up. I should talk about fun, or actually I'm going to talk about the bad news. I'm going to talk about tedious stuff today, although it's game theory, which is not so tedious. But hand in your 3 copies. I assume, if you did anybody not hand in 3 copies? Good. Anybody put their name on it? Good. Okay. I'll get into how to grade these things and how we're going to distribute them in a second. I've got office hours today, although I think the demand for office hours might be a little bit lower than it would have been yesterday. And that's at 12:30. They will have a guest lecturer on Thursday. Pretty cool guy from the Netherlands who's started his career with houseboats. So he'll come and tell us about stuff. I just spent like 4 hours with him yesterday. He's a very cool guy. So Thies, T-I-E-S is his name. And he will be talking on you guys. Quick. If Diana's gonna let you hand it in, you're lucky. She might start taking bribes in a minute. Right. So here's what we're going to do on the grading. Okay? So this is the moment you want to take some notes. Some person said, well, can I just say, thumbs up, thumbs down, and give them their ranking? No. Here's what you need to have on your grading of the briefing. I'll draw you a picture. 1 page, margins, font, just like you did, okay? Put your ID up here. Put the ID of who you are grading up here. Gradee and grader. I want you to write 4 things on this grade. I want a small summary of what they said in terms of their logic or in terms of their argument. Okay, it can be a sentence or so. This is a very common element in reviewing journal papers, academic review of journal papers. It kind of ensures that you actually read it. Okay, it also ensures that you actually understood what the argument of the writer was. So just a brief summary. I'm not going to tell you that it's 3 words. I'm not going to tell you that it's 300 words. Just a brief summary. Okay. I also want you to write what you like about it, what you don't like about it, and I want you to rank it. Right? And the rank is going to be, you could say 1, 2, or 3. All right? As in 3rd place. Right? If you're standing up, sit. Come, make some space, people here.
Here.
No, your last 4. This is a double blind. Here. What? If you think that the second one is close to the first one, that kind of thing, yeah. If you want to put a note to us, this might be the place to put it. All of my colleagues are amazing. I can't wait to work with them in the future. Please give me funding or whatever. Yeah, go ahead and put a comment down there. But obviously, you're not going to sit there and say, I, David Zetlin, think this, that, and the other about your crappy paper or your great paper.
So after the ranking, do you need to give a justification on why?
No, this is your justification here.
But in the likes and dislikes, do we just talk about this paper or do we compare it to?
I would not bother to do that because that person is unlikely to read those other 2 papers. Okay? So what you have to, you will have that, the way I would do it is if I had 3 of these things, I'd sit there and I'd read one, read the other one, go, well, my first opinion, my first impression, which is usually the most important one, is that I like this one better. And then I will go ahead and do the analysis. Now, on the other hand, don't sit there and say, ooh, that one looks nice, and now I will find a reason to justify that it's the best one, right? You have to put a little bit of brain power into it. But then, you know, if you go through this process, you can do it the other way. You can do it as like summarize all three of them, write what you like and dislike, and then at the end say, well, actually, you know, this is how I want to rank it. You can do it whatever way you want, okay? And in some ways, there's no right way to do it. What you're just trying to do is to choose the one that you like the best out of all of them. And then the second best and the third best.
So, you want us to turn in 3 pieces of paper?
Yes.
One for each one?
Yes.
Even if it's less than a page? Or
It will fit on a page.
It will fit on a page.
Right.
But
It will not fit on 2 pages. It will fit on a page.
But even if it's less than a page, you don't want to stick 2 in there on the same page.
No, because, yeah, what you're going to do is you're going to hand in, remember, you're going to hand in the, your thingy plus the original staple behind it.
Okay.
Okay? Because they're going to get it back. You are going to get back the comments of everybody else.
Oh, okay.
All right? Plus, we are going to somehow put a summary grade on across all these things. Or we might just, I mean, it's like, you have no idea the logistical nightmare that I've just created for us, the 3 of us. Yeah, the INI and the GSIs. And I appreciate your forbearance. This is a very complicated way of doing grading. You know, in the old school, I would just take all of your briefings, go to the top of the stairs, throw them, and oh, there's the A stair, and that's the B stair. But, you know, what we're trying to do is really build in a heavy-duty critical thinking cycle into basically, you know, a 90-person class, which is, you know, this would normally be in a 15-person seminar.
Do we have a criteria, like, to judge like and don't like, or is it totally subjective?
It's totally subjective. It's you.
I mean, but things like, I like this topic better is...
Whatever you know, you are the politician reading this, right? Or you're the politician's aide, right? And you're like, is this worth passing to my boss? The top one is the one that you want to pass to your boss. The second one, given the possibility of time, might be, well, this is in second place. The third one, my boss doesn't need to see this, right? And if you are the boss, then you'll be sitting there going, why did you give me this crap? And then you fire your aide, okay? So keep that in mind.
Should we mark on the original?
You can mark on the original. Don't you know, leave any blood types behind.
Should we take into consideration if 2 of the papers talk about the same problem and subject, and that we do as a criteria?
You can do that. You just don't explicitly cross-reference the papers, okay? But if someone, you know, people were asking me, should I be specific? Should I be vague? It's the problem occurs over and over again, right? And you know, if you're saying, I saw someone said, oh, to my boss, the Minister of Finance in Peru, right? Well, you might be sitting there going, oh, I don't know anything about Peru. I'm going to give this one a bad grade. But try and step into that person's feet for a minute, okay? And if it turns out to be hard because it's all written in Spanish, then that's fine. You can give you a bad grade. Okay, so just you know, just try and read it as if it's directed to you, and you might need to step out of your typical pair of shoes, but only a little bit over. Okay, don't go into strange land. Any other questions on this grading stuff? Okay, it is due at the start of class a week from now, right? Next Tuesday.
And our homework 3 is due also?
Now, homework 3 we're going to hand out on Tuesday. This is like, I just realized that the cycle of crush is going to arrive. And, you know, it's like, we just worked, and now we're just working, and now we're just working, and I'm sorry, that's what's going on.
So
We might have like a house party for the final, I'm not quite sure. Oh, yeah, so, yeah, no, this is the question. So, discussion is canceled this week. Next week is the 17th through whatever. That's not Thanksgiving week. There will be discussion next week. There's a strike. Sailors not even have school. When is the strike? The whole week? But what day? Wednesday.
Wednesday and Friday. Yeah.
Wednesday, just Friday. No. Okay, look, strikes are not official university holidays. We're having section next week. And section next week is going to be awesome because I didn't tell this to Faye and Diana yet, but we're going to be doing some more games, okay? So, week of Thanksgiving, no section because we don't have Friday.
So our homework three is due after?
Nope. Homework 3 is due the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. Right? Fast. Thanksgiving's late. Remember, it's 17 to 24. That's when your homework 3 is going to be due. Okay? You can turn in anything early.
And then do we get the final briefing on that thing, or is that a week later?
The final briefing will be due on I'm not quite sure. Oh, wait, I have the syllabus. What a shocking idea. The final briefing is due on December 1, which is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. Oh, sorry. It's not a 12-day holiday. Okay, and remember, you already know what Briefing 2 is. Right? It's rewrite your post on your blog. All right? Get it on a page, make it better.
Is the jargon rule still applicable for the second briefing?
No, the second briefing is going to be, well, it's going to be peer graded again, right? So, in a sense, you can, if you want to drop in marginal cost for your peers to impress them, go right ahead.
Is it going to be graded to someone?
Yes, the nightmare will continue.
Well, what happens, because the blog posts were written based on special interest, so what if you wrote about, like,
The blog post or Briefing 1?
the blog,
Blog posts are written on anything.
yeah, so what if you wrote about, like, football, and the person who reads it doesn't know anything about sports? Isn't that kind of like, it's SOL, right?
Yeah, you could be SOL. I mean, some people write about carbon, and people don't care about carbon either. So, you're trying to simultaneously, I mean, you know this, if you wrote, I mean, maybe you wrote a blog post and it's like, oh, good, football, and it goes on agronomics where football fans do not hang out, right? So, you can recast the blog post any way you want, all right? But the argument that the grading on Briefing 2 is going to be the same as on Briefing 1. It's going to be how good is your economic analysis, how believable is your argument. I've seen some pretty good comments. This is the whole point, obviously. People that are commenting on your blog posts have been giving you help, right? And thou shalt refer to that and hopefully improve it, because also the voters, the people that are grading you, this is only single blind on Briefing 2. They know who you are, you don't know who they are. They can go look at those comments and say, ooh, I wonder if they addressed that issue, and not very well, or did very well. Okay? So that's what they'll be doing.
So when you just said you could change it, you mean you could change the topic or just change how you
No, you can. You should rewrite it, your blog post, right, to improve it, including like I made a typo or a spello or whatever you want to call it. Okay, but if you just cut and paste it, then yeah, go for it. Your grader might not be so happy.
But when you say that you can like recast it however way you want to, like.
When you rewrite, you rewrite.
But let's say like you were talking about football, and then now you want to talk about like the economics of sports teams. Like, is that?
No, I want you to redo your blog post. It's so that consider that the one that went up on the blog was your first draft. So don't go change the topic to a new first draft. Yeah, question. Yeah.
Why don't you slightly alter the topic so that it's more specific or more general?
It's your second draft.
So you want us to keep the same, like, bottom line, but maybe just refine the argument?
You can change that too, as long as you make it better, right? If you make it worse, then that was a bad move. Any other questions? Yeah.
So is the grading versus each other or versus the improvement you did off of the first block?
That's a good question. I will allow the graders to take that into consideration when they're ranking you. It'll be ranking again.
Yeah. But so which will it be more?
Well, it'll be the overall, how does this piece stand alone, right? And if they sit there and say, oh, and you improved, well, if you improve from crap to a little bit better than crap, then it's not going to help, right? If you're going from awesome to super awesome, then that's fine. Okay?
So do you want this again to fit one page?
Everything the same.
Okay.
It's all the same process. The only thing that's going to be different is that you're going to know who,
So you put your name
theoretically you know who it is, and let's just not even bother to pretend, right? Because someone's. I recommend that when you're grading Briefing 2, you go and look up that person's thing.
So should we just write our name on it?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah, that'll make it easier to sort things out again. Any other questions? Okay, great. So, a little bit of, I want to kind of wrap up this idea of incomplete contracts, okay? The naive form of economics is that when two people make a contract, Mr. A and Mr. B, and they make a contract for performance. Let's just say that, you know, it's a principal agent even. You've got it's a painting contract. I'm going to paint your house. Okay? And Mr. B is a painter. This is the agent, and this is the principal. Forget the A and B. This is the principal, and this is the agent. Okay? They're making a contract. Now you don't have to worry about adverse selection and monitoring necessarily. I'm just saying, this is a typical example. Okay? You make a contract, and the contract says the agent is going to put in best efforts to paint the house for the payment of whatever the hell it is, $12,000. I don't even know how much it costs to paint a house. Anybody know? No painters here. So my landlord's a painter. Ironically, I should ask him. So you make a deal. I paint your house. You give me some money, right? Now, what happens if halfway through the thing, the guy comes out and says, "Oh, can you paint the kids' room?" Right? Or halfway through it, the whatever Walmart runs out of off-white taupe, and you put in off-white, whatever, another version of off-white. It's one of those yuppie torture questions, right? So you kind of change colors, gradients halfway, okay? And then at the end of the deal, essentially you arrive at a problem, right? Because the contract did not specify how to modify payment based on painting the kids' room, or did not specify what kind of deduction might happen if you kind of change the paint color on the way. Some people might not care, right? And you're the painter, you're like, dude, no one cares. It's off taupe and off taupe. No one will know the difference, right? But if you have this homeowner's like, or even worse, the homeowner's taking advantage of that to say, oh, you breached contract. This guy actually called me, an acquaintance of mine from DC. He said, I was subletting my room. He called me last night. I'm subletting my room until December, and the guy says my roommate is threatening to kill him, and so he's moving out. And I said I'll pay him back the prorated rent, you know, until the day he moves out. He says, that's not enough. I want $50 more because it's expensive. And I will sue you if you don't give me $50 more. And this guy's calling me going, what? Why should I give him more money? Is he going to sue me because it's going to cost him $100 a night to stay in a hotel room and my roommate has made his life difficult and da-da-da-da-da? And I'm like, what the fuck, right? But that's an incomplete contract, right? You know, when you make a lease deal, it's like, well, you know, you trust me, I trust you, you want a house, I want it, and you just kind of write general things. But you don't have a clause in there called, I hate your roommate, get me out of here, plus a bonus points or bonus payment when I have to go stay in a hotel, right? And the guy was, you know, it's one of these law student interns who basically should be shot. From UCLA, obviously. So, the thing is that when you have this situation of an incomplete contract, whether it's principal agent or it's peer-to-peer or whatever you want to call it, then you're going to have a fight. Now, you might end up on Judge Judy, right? My dad's favorite show. Or you might end up like in a fist fight in the hallway. But the problem really is that you didn't specify ahead of time what to do. And sometimes, girl in the back with the computer, please don't do that. The only person that can use a computer is Brenna because she's transcribing these lectures. Anybody else should not be using computers. You can write notes on each other's paper. I know some of you like to do that. So, the old form of texting. So the thing is, with incomplete contracts, you're going to get into a fight, and it turns out that the argument over how to fulfill the incomplete contract could end up destroying more surplus in the economic sense than you actually were making from that deal. Okay? So if someone comes and mows your lawn for $10 and it gives you a utility of 5 or a surplus of 5 because you saved yourself some effort, and then they mow down your hydrangeas, those are small. Are those small flowers? Whatever, your daisies, I don't know, small flowers. And you're like, whoa, you know, I didn't say mow down. He's like, well, you said mow it. And it's like, well, yeah, but the lawn. Oh, you didn't specify that, incomplete contract. So you end up getting into a hassle, and you're in a fist fight with your lawnmower boy, and then you go to jail, and you're like, whoa, it wasn't worth $5. Okay? So this is a problem, is what I'm basically highlighting, if I haven't emphasized it enough. And it's a problem that occurs all the time because when you write a contract, you cannot specify every potential eventuality. You can't specify if you know, a tree falls on your house or whatever. And so then I'll get into another problem. You have a hand up, and then I'll get into some other things. Go ahead.
Can you also call it simultaneous?
It's not necessarily about a principal agent model, right? So it just ends up being that maybe there's some uncertainty comes along, right? You actually make a contract with a painter, and then his wife dies, and he has to go to the funeral and stuff like that. He does not finish the job on time, right? And it's like, hey, you didn't finish it on time. It's like, dude, my wife died. It's like, you didn't put that in the contract, right? So you have to be, I mean, this is actually where lawyers do make their money, because you have these like the medical bill, which is like 1,400 pages, or 1,900 pages just to cover everything. Now, the most common example from economics of a problem with contracting is what's called a stranded asset. And that's what happens when a person who owns a mine makes a deal with a person who owns a railroad and says, build a railroad, as an example. Build a railroad to my mine to carry the ore away. Right? Now, these guys are essentially peers. And the guy who's got the mine says, I need a railroad. And the guy who's got the railroad says, I will build it to your mine, future tense, if you agree to pay me this many dollars per ton. Right? Now, if you use your cost accounting, remember we were doing theory of the firm, for the railroad, what's the balance between fixed costs and variable costs? Fixed costs are bigger or lower than variable costs? Bigger, right? And then what happens once you build that road? Are those fixed what are those fixed costs called? Sunk, right? And so this miner guy can say, look, I'll pay you $50 a ton to haul out X tons per year. And the $50 is like 40 for fixed costs to cover your fixed costs and 10 to cover your variable costs, because you as the railroad guy know you've got to pay back the debt and etc. And you know you've got to put coal in the thing. And then the guy comes along and says, hey, you know what? I love your railroad tracks. They're really nice. How about I pay you $10 a ton? In fact, I'll let you have a profit, 11. Right? Now, the railroad owner is screwed, right? Because there's this, essentially, yes, he can run the railroad at a profit, but he will never make back his fixed costs. Okay? And that's because it's hard to move railroad tracks around. So what you need in this circumstance is a very robust contract that can be enforced, which is a whole bunch of transactions costs, right? And the idea is that if you don't have that, then you're never, as a mine owner, or especially if you're a mine owner with a bad reputation, no one is ever going to build a railroad for you. Right? The only thing that really would work is actually to do what? Brainwave. Yeah, build your own railroad. Right? Vertical integration. Okay? Now, and I mentioned this in terms of principal-agent dynamics. The best way to take care of this kind of incomplete contract situation is to do what? There's two keywords I'm looking for. Before you sign a contract, what do you look into in terms of who you're signing with?
Signal?
Kind of. What's a signal? What signal are you looking for?
Reputation.
Reputation, right? So, you know, before I sign a painting contract, I look for recommendations, right? That can be principal agent, but it's also like, hey, you know, it's on, if you go on to Yelp, so-and-so came out to paint my house, and he found this extra thing, and then he did it at no extra charge, or he did it at a very reasonable extra charge. This is the kind of thing you like to hear when you're signing these contracts. What's the other thing that you want to do in terms that we can borrow from principal agent? Do you go for like one huge contract that covers 16 years, or what do you do? Repetition, right? Lots of little contracts. Okay. Now it's not exactly easy to build lots of little railroad tracks, right? But you can maybe do that in terms of kind of a contract to get your lawn mowed, right? say that you say, the guy says, well, I can do it for $10 a week, or I'll give you $400 for the whole year. Pay up front. Right? And you're like, yeah, let's try it out a few times first. Go ahead.
Is this kind of like what in the Eleanor Ostrom interview, we were talking about the irrigation and farmers and how they can do it better than the government?
I think, what about that?
Well, is that kind of this idea like building the mine railroad yourself?
Yeah, well, so the idea, so in the Lynn Ostrom interview, why can farmers run their own irrigation scheme better than a government-run irrigation scheme? And this is like Nepali farmers who are illiterate, okay? We're not talking about, I think PhD is actually worse than farmers at running irrigation. But, and that would be because those farmers are working together on a project that benefits them, right? And whereas the government is a bunch of people in an office who are like, farmers, what are those? They don't necessarily care, right? So there's an alignment of incentives when you have a local irrigation project. It's run by the local irrigators. They might have conflicts with each other, but in some ways they're all in it together a lot more than this third party outsider. So that's not exactly what we're talking about, because that's a good question in general.
But isn't that the same in a way with the mine and the railroad? Because even though the mine owner can say, I'm only going to pay you $10 and you miss out on your fixed costs, the railroad owner also has a lot of leverage because he can just say, well, fine, I'm not going to work for you at all. And then the miner gets stranded with all the ore, and he has no other way of getting it out. So in a way, they both need each other, right?
Not exactly, because if you offer $11 per bucket, right? Sunk cost, using the sunk cost analogy, you can actually, I mean, I know that they will fight, and it could last for years, right? But in the end, it's like, dude, tracks are done. You can still make money, right? That's what sunk costs are about.
But isn't that where maybe the...
So the person who is more stranded actually is the railroad, because he's got debt, and this guy's got a mine, and what happens is he just leaves the stuff in the ground. Fine, it'll be here in 20 years, right? Like diamonds or gold. That's an extraction question.
So is that assuming, though, that the person with the railroad would act completely rational? Because, I mean, my guess would be basically that just out of spite, the railroad owner might say, well, fine, then I don't care about the loss of cost.
Spite would determine how far up this price will go towards $40, right? So the more stubborn, and if the railroad owner has a reputation of killing people he doesn't like who break contracts, then the guy's gonna be like, yep, $40, here you go, right? So that's where reputation comes on the other side. But the person who is more in trouble is the railroad owner who built this railroad, could potentially be in debt. This guy's just sitting here, right? He's gonna have operating costs to run the mine, right? Potentially he's got debt in buying the mine, but in this particular example, let's just concentrate on this person's situation. Other hand? Is there another hand? No? Okay. So that's a little bit on incomplete contracts. I just wanted to touch on that. Now we'll do some game theory. And we're going to do game theory because it's going to be your homework assignment. So take your notes. I'm going to give you some jargon. The jargon in game theory is horrible, because they take perfectly useful words and define them in narrow technological terms, and then you have no idea why perfect information and then complete information. What's the difference? And honestly, it's annoying, but that's what we're just going to do. I am not going to ask you on the final exam, please tell me why perfect information isn't complete information and complete information isn't perfect information, because the words are just too close to each other. But you should know this intuitively, because that's the kind of thing that would show up. Okay, so perfect information is essentially that you're in the game, so we're assuming, the basic assumption is we're in a game. A ludic, it doesn't matter, we're in a game. Okay, so you know all prior moves, like chess. baseball or like whatever. You're sitting, you know what's happened until now, okay? It's kind of obvious, but there are situations where you would not know everybody's move, right? What if you're playing poker and people are taking cards into their hand and throwing them into the discard pile? Is that perfect information? No, right? You don't know what they're throwing away. Complete information. Is when you know strategies and payoffs. In chess, you do not know the strategy of your player. You know they want to beat you, but you don't necessarily know how they want to do it. This is basically true in the prisoner's dilemma. I'll write up the prisoner's dilemma because we're going to use that. I'm putting different payoffs to the prisoner's dilemma, but it's just because the game still holds in terms of strategies.
Do you mean, is that cooperate?
That's cooperate, yeah. Cooperate versus defect. Okay? Cooperate means that you keep your mouth shut. Defect means you keep your mouth open. And you tell things. Okay, so the prisoner's dilemma is a game of complete information because you can see what the payoffs are and you can determine what your opponent's or your colleague's strategy is. Okay? Because you look at the payoffs relative to what you are doing in reaction to what you're doing, and you look at the and then you can plan accordingly, okay? And you know what they know, and they know what you know what they know, and so on, like that video from Princess Bride, okay? Let's go over this for a second and review that. Okay, so if player 2 plays cooperate, the payoffs to player 1 are this one or this one. Okay, this is also terminology that you should keep straight because when we give you games on your homework, you'll be able to do the thing. Do the thing, that's nice and vague. You'll be able to solve it. Okay? So if player 2 cooperates, then player 1 wants to do what? Cooperate or defect? Defect, because 0 is greater than -1. This is advanced mathematics. Okay? If player 2 defects, player 1 wants to cooperate or defect? Defect. Okay, I put these check marks here not just because I'm keeping track of things, but it's a good technique in terms of solving games that are complicated. Okay? Now, if player 1 cooperates, the payoffs to player 2 are -1 and 0. Which one is player 2 going to do? Defect, right? Get a payoff of 0. Or if you want, you can do it like this. This is a little bit more spatially accurate. And if player 1 defects, what is player 2 going to do? Defect, okay? So this one goes this. Cooperate, sorry. This. And that. Okay? So basically what you're getting is you're getting an equilibrium. And there's an equilibrium, there's a Nash equilibrium, there's a subimperfect Nash equilibrium, there's a perfect Bayesian equilibrium, there's all these equilibria. I'm not going to use those words. I hate those words. They're too complicated. Okay? There is an equilibrium. where you're going to get defect, defect, as in the plays by player 1 and 2 are going to be defect, defect. Okay? And therefore, you're going to get this payoff, this set of payoffs.
Oh, what's the difference between expected utility and expected payoff?
Not too much.
So can we use it interchangeably?
No, you're not using expected utility because that's about probability. We're not using any expected utility right now. Okay. These are not expected payoffs, these are equilibrium payoffs. Okay? Again, those words are very similar and they sound normal and it's the same in English, but they don't mean the same thing in economics.
Sorry, question. I thought we were comparing player 2, so maybe we can turn the
So hold on, comparing player 2, given that player 1 does a move?
Yeah.
Okay, given that player 1 does cooperate, the payoffs to player 2 are -1 or 0.
Oh, okay.
Okay? It's hard to get an idea how this works. This is called a, what the hell is it called? Extensive form? Jargon. Extensive form versus what?
Strategic?
No. Diana, do you know? Game theory, so extensive form versus reduced form. This is called reduced form. It's reduced form, and I'll show you what extensive form is, but it's one versus the other, okay? And essentially, this is a simultaneous move game, because player 2 and player 1 are acting simultaneously. And it's complete information. It is not perfect information, because they're moving simultaneously. So you don't know what they did, because they're doing exactly the same time as you're doing. It's complete information. Well, you know their strategy. Their strategy is going to be, player 2 is going to say, well, if player 1 does this, and player 2 says, if I do this, player 1 is going to do this, right? So that's strategies, right? Strategy is what you walk into the game thinking you're going to do, okay, before you make your move. And payoffs are what are going to result from strategies. In a simultaneous game, they run together, right? In a sequential game where you're doing one move after another move, then you're going to set down your strategy and the payoff will emerge, yeah.
In terms of like the Princess Bride example, would the small man, he would have had complete information, but he wouldn't have had perfect information?
Good question. Definitely doesn't have perfect information, and he doesn't have complete information either, because the payoffs were that no matter what he did, he was going to die, right? So he was in a very bad asymmetric situation, and he was not the smartest Sicilian on the block. Yeah.
Did he think he had perfect information though? Because he kept on saying like, "I know where you're from. You're all this and this and that."
Right. That's known as when we go to Baghdad, they will welcome us with open arms. Right. That is a problem of incomplete information. Yes.
It's possible to have both.
Both incomplete and imperfect? Well, no, sorry. Both perfect and complete? Yes, it is.
In this case, would it be?
What did I say? Do I have one that has both of them? If you know all their prior moves, and you know all their... Well, actually, if we played this as a sequential game, right, where one person would move first, and the next person would move, then you would have both perfect information, because the second player would know what the first player did. And you would have complete information because you would know what the payoffs were. Okay? So if you actually were playing this game, and that's actually kind of troublesome. I mean, the trust game that I've told you about is a perfect information and complete information situation. If you're the recipient of some portion of the $10 in the trust game, then you know what they did, right? So you have perfect information. And you know what the payoffs are, because it depends on what you do, right? And then you will make your choice.
So the idea is if it could be sequential
and you trusted the other person, the first person would cooperate and the second person would cooperate?
That's a form of a trust game.
I just feel like if the first person cooperated, the second person would be like, well, I want no.
Yeah, so this is actually, let's get into this. There was a tournament of the Prisoner's Dilemma. It was run by this guy, Axelrod. And, huh? Yes, he's probably German. So, what it was, it's not a German name? Alright. Axel's a good name, though. Axel Foley, that was Eddie Murray, wasn't it? One of those in the Project of Beverly Hills thing. So, what Axelrod did is set up a tournament and invited everybody in the world who wanted to participate. Please submit your strategy to play a repeated Prisoner's Dilemma. Now remember the first time I said Prisoner's Dilemma, it's not repeated, right? But what would happen with repetition? What would happen over time?
People would know which player plays which strategy, and then they would adjust their strategy according to who they play with.
That's right. So what he got, this is back in 1980, which is, when they're still using kind of punch cards with computers. And he took all these strategies and he matched them against each other and then repeated the game 1,000 times or something like that. Some unknown amount of times. Because you can always have, on the 1,000th move, I kill my opponent or whatever, or I kill my person. So he did that, and it was a repeated Prisoner's Dilemma. And all of these guys submitted all these strategies, game theorists, mathematicians, physicists, homeless people, everybody put in their idea. And it turned out that the strategy that was the most, resulted in the highest overall payoff to the person playing it was called tit for tat. Now, you guys probably heard that expression before, quid pro quo, tit for tat. It's been around since the Romans at least. What does it mean?
Screw me, I'll screw you.
You screw me, I'll screw you. Okay, so, and in terms of an extensive form of sequential game, if you defect, I'm going to defect. If you cooperate, what am I going to do? Okay? And in the strategy, what was the first move to make? Would you cooperate or defect playing this strategy? Cooperate. Basically say, let's cooperate. And the person is going to do what? They have a strategy, it's pre-specified, right? They can either cooperate, and then what's going to happen? And then ad infinitum, right? Add to the end of the game. Now, if they do defect, you're going to do what? And they do, well, they do something.
So
Right?
it's between two people? Or
Yes, the strategies are all matched up pairwise. Now, the thing is that it was first move was cooperate, and it was forgiving. Which essentially means I cooperate, you cooperate. I cooperate, you defect, I defect. If you defect, I defect. If you defect, I defect. But if you cooperate again, I cooperate. It was forgiving. It was not vengeful, right? There is another strategy called the Grim Reaper or something like that, which is that I'll cooperate as long as you do, and if you defect, I'll defect forever. Which is kind of like, I'll just keep shooting you, right? You keep bringing flowers, I keep shooting you. Right? It turns out that the Grim Reaper, or whatever that strategy is called, doesn't work very well in the end because you end up basically dead. Right? The way to win this game is to get the most points. And if you get a point for cooperation and you get 0 points for defect, the tit-for-tat strategy is the one that got the most points. It also turns out to be completely intuitive in terms of the way that kids play in the playground, and simple. And these other strategies that were submitted by all these, I think it was submitted by a psychologist. I'm not sure, but all these advanced physics people and all that stuff, and many economists just they didn't work. They didn't work relative to tit-for-tat. Okay, that's something that you should know because it's probably one of the most fun things that come out of game theory. And there's more fun things come out of game theory. Okay, so imperfect information means that you do not know all the moves that came before you. Just to clarify, just to repeat. And incomplete information means you do not necessarily know what that person is going for. If you're playing a chess game with somebody and they decide that they don't want your king, they actually want your rook, then you're playing an incomplete information game, right? Or you could have what's called nature moves first, right? If nature moves first and you think you're playing a game and nature had done something to change what the payoffs were, going to the left instead of going to the right, then you're in a game of incomplete information because the payoff, you're not sure which world you're living in. People that believe in parallel universes can be happy with this.
Can you give an example of that?
I will in a minute, yeah. The whole debate over climate change is one of those issues, right? What is nature going to do when parts per million of carbon dioxide go to 550? Is it all going to be cool? Are we just going to have like a nice little Hawaiian climate? Or are we all going to die? Dolphins are going to eat us or something like that. Okay? So we don't know. This is an incomplete information. It's very similar to uncertainty. Okay? You cannot necessarily assign risk to it. Now, another piece of jargon, very simple, is what's called a cooperative game. Not the same as cooperate in this particular example. A cooperative game versus a non-cooperative game. You'll recognize this because this is basically ludic and this is conflict. So when I said before that ludic games are games that have rules, essentially the whole idea of agreeing on a set of rules and sticking to those rules is a type of cooperation. Okay? If you are playing a non-cooperative game, essentially you bring your chessboard to the park and say, I want to play a game, and the guy brings his baseball bat and says, sure, right? That's not cooperative, right? You cannot commit with a non-cooperative game, you cannot commit ahead of time to a set of rules that will be binding, right? Cooperative game, you can commit ahead of time. You can also commit and say, if I defect, this gun will shoot me. That is a form of a cooperative game. And there are strategies that involve, if I do this, I will die.
So then do games change from ludic to conflict? If their first set of rules everybody agrees until the person loses and then he says, well now I'm going to get out of my bed.
That could happen,
So
right?
then it becomes a conflict.
Right, right. It's like the MolotovRibbentrop pact before World War II, right? It was like the Soviets, Stalin and Hitler, two really nice guys. They decided, hey, you know what, Poland, let's split it up. Okay, so they made this Molotov-Ribbentrop non-aggression pact. It was publicly announced. Everybody's like, holy cow, these two guys are together. They've already been killing people like crazy. Non-aggression, there was a secret codex and said, and we'll split Poland in half or whatever, and who needs the Poles anyway? They didn't announce that. And they went and they split up Poland, and Stalin was happy and Hitler was happy. And then, interesting, Trotsky, I looked this up, Trotsky actually was like, Stalin's going to screw Hitler, and Hitler's not going to know what to do. And Stalin screwed Hitler. No, what happened first? Hitler screwed Stalin. That was it. Hitler knew Trotsky. Hitler screwed Stalin by invading the Soviet Union. And Stalin's like, holy cow, he didn't believe it. Right? So that was where Stalin and Hitler had a cooperative agreement, and then Hitler said, forget about it. That was why war is hell. So, that's an example there. Now, the concept of a Nash equilibrium, I am going to tell you about that because it comes up all the time. It essentially means that you cannot gain by changing your strategy, changing your move. So it's like, given the action by A, I can't gain by changing my action.
So you would be B, basically?
Yeah, I, B. Or actually, let's do it this way. Just keep that in mind there. Given the action by 2, 1 cannot gain, right? So given that 2 does this, should I change my strategy or given that the action is you know, that's kind of a loose word. Let's put strategy. Given the action, strategy, payoffs, you know, given that this person has this set of incentives, should I change what I do, right? If I change what I do unilaterally, will that make me better off? If I'm playing a prisoner's dilemma, and I'm sitting there and I'm Mr. 1, and I'm looking at those payoffs to Mr. 2, can I change my strategy from defect to cooperate and do better? Well, given that he's going to defect, I will not do better. I will lose 10 instead of losing 5. Right? So, because I cannot do better, I will stick with my strategy, which is to defect. And if you look at the incentives that Mr. 2 faces, it's exactly the same. Do not change your strategy. Okay? This game is in an equilibrium of defect-defect, a Nash equilibrium of defect-defect. So the commonsensical idea of Nash is that should I change what I do, and if I change what I'm doing, will that change what they're doing? Because if you can change what you're doing and they do the same thing and you're getting paid off better, then you were doing the wrong thing, right? But if you change what they're doing and they don't change what they're doing, and you don't get any more, then you shouldn't change what you're doing. A whole bunch of words, right? The idea basically is that, can I do better by switching? If I can't do better by switching, then I stay here. And if they can't do better by switching, then they stay there, and that's an equilibrium, a Nash equilibrium. A Nash equilibrium means that, yeah, the strategies of the two people will not change. So potentially, in a different game, you could have this move by one person, and this move, which is not symmetric, by the other person, and it could still be Nash. Okay? And this would end up being the Nash equilibrium. So they don't have to make the same move. Their moves have to be robust, but they will not change their moves. Is that your question? Different question. No? Yeah, we'll stick with that for a while. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
So there is a better strategy out there, but neither of them, independent of the other one, can change. In that
Right.
way.
If they
could collude, technically they could overcome it.
coordinate is the question, right? So here's a coordination game. Let me just put it next to here. Let's just make this left and right and up and down. Okay? Simultaneous move game, those are the payoffs. Now, if Mr. 1 does up, what should Mr. 2 do? Left. Okay? If Mr. 1 does down, what should Mr. 2 do? Right. Okay? If Mr. 2 does left, what should Mr. 1 do? And if Mr. 2 does right, what should Mr. 1 do? Down. Okay. Is this a Nash equilibrium? It is not a Nash equilibrium, right? Because if we're going, how do I say it right? There's two equilibria. I think there's two equilibria, but if I switch my position, then they should switch their position. It's not stable. I might be abusing these words. Don't worry about the word Nash for a second, right? But there are two equilibria, here and here, right? It's a simultaneous move game, though, right? So if you move wrong, this is why it's called a coordination game. Given that I move up, you're going to want to move left. But if I move down, you're going to want to move right. But I don't know what you're going to do. Right? So there's no clear strategy. And the only strategy actually to play this one is called a mixed strategy. It's essentially to flip a coin before each play. Say, heads I go up, tails I go down. And if they're flipping the coin simultaneously, then that's the best you can do. Right? So it's called a mixed strategy. That's the jargon, mixed. And on average, you're going to get a payoff of a half, essentially. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. And that's kind of an expected payoff, right? If you play a mixed strategy of playing up 50% of the time and down 50% of the time, then you're going to get 1 50% of the time and 0 50% of the time.
So is that the same thing as expected utility?
It is not expected utility.
Okay.
Well, no, utility is you go to the payoff and then you have you can call it expected utility because it has probability built into it, right? But the expected payoff is what's driving expected utility, right? But you're going to have an expected payoff of 1/2 because half the time you get 0 and half the time you get 1. And utility, don't worry about utility, just worry about expected payoff.
If you decide, for example, just to do up all the time, isn't your payoff still 1/2 depending on how the other person's shot is?
Well, if you're doing up all the time, and then they decide I'm going to do right all the time, then you're going to get 0 all the time, right? So it turns out that all the time is the problem. And if you literally just flip a coin, and if they're flipping a coin, that's okay. If they declare, I will shoot myself if I go left, then you're like, okay, I'm going to go down, right? Because then they're making a credible commitment, let's hope, right, within your cooperative game. That's interesting, cooperative, I will shoot myself, but that is cooperative, right? They're making a credible threat to carry out that strategy, and then you know that you should go to that play. Game theory is, like, insane in terms of how big it has gotten. And so I'm just trying to give you this kind of overview from the high altitude. And hopefully not too confusing altitude, but we'll see how that goes, yeah.
If the prisoners are not considered non-coordination because they were playing and they didn't cooperate?
Well, they end up coordinating around this, given the payoffs. It's considered to be a negative sum game because what they coordinate around is a bad setup. They would prefer to switch to this, but there's no good way to do it. Right?
Is it considered a coordination?
It's not a pure coordination problem because this is a Nash equilibrium here, right? So these two equilibria are equally beneficial. They just can't figure out how to get there. This one is clearly superior, right? But getting there is the problem. So
they can't get there?
Well, they do get there on repeated games, right? Because then you can play a tit for tat strategy, but on a one-shot game, it's hard to say. I would love to explaining game theory. And, you can see what's going on, but explaining how to beat it or what the terminology is like really kind of hard. And I just like the terminology. It's too complicated. Too many different words mean important things. Any other questions about this? I'm going to keep going on the game theory stuff. Right, so you can get out of a prisoner's dilemma situation if you can repeat or you can credibly signal what you're doing. Let me give you another example just to make it annoying about how these things work out. Okay, so we've got these payoffs, up, down, left, right, 3, 2, 1, 4, 2, 6, sorry, 5 and 1, okay? Those are the payoffs. If Mr. 1 does up, what should Mr. 2 do? If Mr. 1 does down, what should Mr. 2 do? Left. If Mr. 2 does left, what should Mr. 1 do? Up. If Mr. 2 does right, what should Mr. 1 do? Well, that's annoying. Right? You just cycle and cycle and cycle. This is almost like you want to have, if you had a coin flip scenario, you would not want to do 50-50 coin flips, would you? Just for the sake of example, say that 2 is playing left and right with a coin flip. 50% chance of left, 50% chance of right. Okay? So Mr. 1, if he's doing 50-50, if Mr. 1 does up, then he's going to be getting, well, yeah, I'll do this now. Okay, if Mr. 2 is doing 50-50, then 50% of the time Mr. 1 is going to be getting a choice between 3 and 2, right? Choosing up and down.
David, you want to turn off the camera a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead and turn it off. Okay, so if Mr. 1 does up, then he's going to, and Mr. 2 is going back and forth, then 1/2 of the time he's going to get 3, and 1/2 of the time he's going to get 1. What's the expected payoff, right? Expected utility, if you want, of that? 2. Okay. And if he goes down, 1/2 times what? Not 6. Payoffs to 1. 2. Plus 1/2 times 5. Expected payoff is going to be 3.5. What's the better play for 1 to make? Down, right? Given that the 2 is flipping back and forth between left and right, 1 should go for down. Now, here's the thing, what's going to happen, okay? What's going to happen is this 3.5 means that 1 is going to be going for down, and 2 is going to sit there and say, wait, 1 is going for down. Maybe I shouldn't be going back and forth 50-50, right? Then 2 will start looking at the same addition here and saying, if 1 is going down, I'm going to get either 6 or 1. I should be spending a lot more time on left. Do you see that? If 1 is going to go down, 2 should go left. And if 2 is going left, that's not 50-50 anymore, right? So what happens is 2 starts going left all the time. But if 2 is going left all the time, what should 1 do? Go up. Uh-oh. Okay, so this is how the strategies would evolve, right? And in fact, even if you're going to play this game 1 time, you can figure out essentially a mixed strategy, which means that for some proportion of the time you play one game, or one move, and some proportion of the time you play another move, that is not 50-50 for 1 and 50-50 for 2. It turns out to be, I don't even know, like 1/3, 2/3 for 1, 1/3 play up of the time, 1/3 of the time play up, 1/3 of the time, 2/3 of the time play down. You see what I'm saying? You start moving around the mixture of your moves according to the other person doing it, and you're essentially solving them simultaneously to find out where you want to get an equilibrium. And there will be a Nash equilibrium. This is how Nash equilibria emerged. And then, if you actually were going to play it 1 time, you would flip your coin that's weighted 2/3, 1/3, or 75%, or 72%, 28%. Does everybody understand what I'm saying there? That's going to be on the homework. Okay? I'll put some random stuff up, and you're going to work out what the percentages are. Go ahead. There's no Nash that what?
There's no Nash equilibrium to begin with, but you manipulate it together.
There's no pure strategy like up with 100% chance and down with 0% chance, right? but there's a mixed strategy of a percentage chance on each of those moves. That's what a mixed strategy is. And of course, when you go out in the world, you're not in football. Actually, they've done some games with soccer players shooting penalty kicks. And it turns out that there's a big strategy there, because you have a goalie, and the goalie's going to jump left or right, typically, right? And or stay in the center, I guess. And it turns out that when they do this with real soccer players in an experimental lab, they're very good at randomizing their left-right, because they understand that penalty kick type of strategy. Okay. Now, if you're out there and you're playing high school football, you might be like, I always go right because my car has a right-hand drive. I don't know, right? Some kind of superstition. But people that are pros that repeat this game a lot, they actually understand mixed strategies and they use mixed strategies. But for us, in most of our situations, we're not used to that. If you play sports and you're used to dodging left or dodging right, you realize that you actually want to randomize in a very random way, not like a fake random way. Okay, hand in the back. There was a hand? No? Yeah.
So how would you find the percentages in that example?
You would just keep working through those payoffs until these two are equal. Right? Another hand?
Can you explain how you did that?
How I did this?
Yeah.
I just said, given that Mr. 2 is going left or right, with a 50% chance of each, right? So if he's doing left 50% of the time, and I play up,
Oh,
all right. So given that I play up, half the time I'm going to get 3, and half the time I'm going to get 1.
So you start with one of the players, like one is fixed and
Yeah, you got to hold. It's like, given I do this, and they're doing that, what are my payoffs going to be? And given I do that, what are my payoffs going to be? Okay? And then you would iterate to go through the step-by-steps until you update one, then you update the other, then you update one, then you update the other. And at some point you'll converge. And the homework you will, because I'll make sure you do.
So the probability 2 goes left 75% of the time, that has to be 3/4.
If the probability of 2 goes left is 3/4 of the time, and I'm playing up, then I'm going to have, 3/4 times this,
Okay.
right? And then this will be 1/4. Okay, let me explain the sequential game, and then we're going to redistribute the briefings. A sequential game only means that one player moves and then the other player moves in sequence. Okay, so this is player 1 is choosing between up and down, and then player 2 is choosing between, given that player 1 goes up, player 2 chooses between up prime and down prime. Or, if player 1 goes down, player 2 is going to choose between up prime and down prime. And then there's going to be payoffs. The payoff to player 1 is always the first payoff. And the payoff to player 2 is always going to be the second payoff. Player 1 moves first. Player 2 will then be at one of these nodes. This is the jargon. It's called a node. This is called a branch. Okay, so player 1 is going to go on the upper branch, the down branch. And then player 2 is going to be at a node, and at the node they'll make a decision, right? So let's look at player 2's strategy for a second here. Now, this is the most important thing on how to solve this game. I said it before in the class, backward induction. Backwards induction. I have no idea why the word induction is there, but it's like backwards logic, whatever. Question? There's a No? Okay. Through backwards induction, if 2 is facing the choice between up prime or down prime on this node. What are the payoffs that 2 is choosing between? 0 and 1. Which one is player 2 going to do? Down, right? If player 2 is choosing between up prime and down prime, he's going to choose between 2 and 1. Which he's going to do? Up, right? So if player 2 is going to be doing up or down, player 1 says, aha, I have to decide where I want player 2 to be. Where does player 1 want player 2 to be? Down, up, up, down, up. Which one is it? Player 1 is choosing between 2 and 1. Which one does player 1 want? 2, right? Player 1 will play up. That's how you solve that game by backward induction.
How are you able to say that 2 would choose down?
If player 1 plays up, 2 is either going to get 0 for playing up prime.
Are you playing against someone, or are you playing to get your own points, or are you playing like...
You always look at payoffs yourself. You don't necessarily care that player 1 makes more or less than you do. You look at your own payoffs. So there could be some notion of envy involved. Right? I want to minimize their payoff.
It's a game, and you have less points than the person you lose.
No. This is payoffs. This is payoffs. Right? So it's not yeah. So you don't want to go for this because we both lose. Right? We tie at 0. What you want to look at is, do I prefer to have 1 scoop of ice cream or 0 scoops of ice cream? Okay.
How would this work in a repeated game? Because you've got a better payoff for 1.
If you were doing a repeated game, then you would keep putting more and more branches at each of these nodes until it blew up into this whole root system. Right? That could show up on the homework. Right? As long as we can fit it on a page. Landscape. Yeah?
So the solution to the game is 1 is always better off than 2?
No, there's nothing to do with 1 better off than 2. The solution to the game is up, down, prime. Right? Player 1 will play up, and player 2 will play down prime. In a sense, that's an equilibrium. Right? Or a Nash equilibrium.
At some point, wouldn't if this is repeated, wouldn't 2 choose up, so that number 1 has to choose down?
If 2 is choosing up, then they would be getting 0.
Then in the next trial, 1 wouldn't choose up again because 2 might just choose up again.
Because they're trying to get 2 is trying to force 1 to go down. Is that what you're saying? 1 goes before 2. Yes, that's true.
I mean, if this is something that's repeated, 1's always going first.
1 is always going
2
first.
still has power, but it's like 2 chooses the end result.
2 does have power to choose the end result, but 2 acts in his own self-interest, which is that he would prefer 1 to 0.
So in a repeated thing, he'll always choose down every single time.
If they play this game over and over again, 2 will always choose down. Yes. Because 1 is always better than 0. We'll get more into this stuff, right? But right now, this is fun, very fun. But we'll have to stop and do our distribution of these briefings.